The last section of basing to cover is the command and control basing. This covers your divisional officers, your brigade officers, your corps level officers, army wings, nations, things like that. So before you is a group of or selection of officers and their respective basing. In the foreground we have divisional or brigade level officers. For example, we have a Prussian here, we've got a French Guard cavalry type divisional officer, infantry type divisional officer, or dragoon or cavalry type divisional officer. As you can see, they're all based on the same size base, 1-inch frontage, 2-inch depth. Again, based simply because of the figure. The uniform, and it's common to all officer figures in the game. The next scale up will be a corps level type command, where we have a French corps level type command base, and I've got a Prussian one over here. And these are composed of two sections. The actual officer, and note the little notch which is put in the base, it makes it easier to keep the bases together. And the actual headquarters section, which is the base which is representative over here. Just as a little side note, the headquarters section is considered like an artillery unit with equivalency of one figure for a corps level officer. Again, the basing is 1 inch by 2 inches, and it's the same for both halves of the corps base. Once you get to the corps level officers, you start to see ADCs appear, and the corps level command has 2 ADCs, and they're based the same as a divisional officer. The next stage up the evolution chain of command is an army level command, which is basically the equivalency roughly of 3 corps. It's a 2-inch wide by a 3-inch depth base. Again, same thing as before with the corps. The army officer is detachable from the corps base, and I put a notch in my particular figures to represent this as an army level base with a square shaped notch. Once you go above the army, which by the way has 3 ADCs attached to it, but I haven't deployed any of those on the figures here. They'll be similar to the ones which we have out here. It is of course the nation level type commander. And these are typical things like for Napoleon, the Tsar of Russia, King William of Prussia, or Kaiser Franz of Austria. Those are the only real, quote, monarchs which actually were seen on the battlefields of the Napoleonic Wars. And this would be a nation-level base, and it's 6 inches wide with a 3-inch depth, just to give it to the frontage of the battlefield. Now in this unique situation, I've actually made a little custom base here on the side of just some French Old Guard Grenadiers marching by. But you could take this base off and actually put the officer there instead. Last but not least, we have some unique officers, like an engineering officer. It's based on a 1/2-inch wide, 1-inch depth base. And engineering officers are used in siege situations where we'll be able to build certain types of dug-out positions or dug-in positions and things of that nature. They're a requirement for doing the actual position construction. Or you might have a sapper battalion or a pioneer battalion if you're a Germanic state. Typically 2 to 4 figures in strength, and they're again based upon their national characteristics of the army for what their basing unit would be, either 2 or 3 rank. And last but least, we have something called an artillery officer, typically an officer with a telescope or something of that nature, based on the divisional size base. And artillery officers are common to basically 3 countries. They are Russia, who would control basically the artillery reserve for the Russian army if it was deployed. France, which would typically control a combined or grand battery of cannon, and typically that would be things like the French Old Guard artillery. And maybe later period you have it in the Prussians and or the Austrian commands where they would have an artillery officer. This is generally very late in the wars, typically 1813, 1814 onwards. Artillery officers give a benefit of fire, a bonus shall we say, and also they can direct the fire in concentration against specific targets, unlike the general artillery rules which restrict you to only 2 shots at the same target. That being said, you have seen before you typically the command structure when basing of the game.